All right. Welcome, everybody, to June's 2024 Prometheus Dev Summit. Just a reminder that this is a CNCF public meeting. Code of conduct applies. TLDR, be nice to each other. Okay. So the first topic, I will go with young Prometheus 3 scope issues could use more attention. Let me put this behind. I didn't check if Yan is in the meeting.
I'm
Check.
here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So feel free to take it over.
All right. Thanks a lot. So this came up a couple of weeks in the Prometheus 3 sync for the coordination team. We still, on the Prometheus 3 board, there's still a fair amount of open issues that aren't in progress, that seem inactive or are not actionable specifically for people who are not community members yet. And it would be good if we could start either cleaning those up. This has started today already, actually. Or if there's actually more info, more context that could be provided, it would be great if we could add that in case there are future contributors who want to work on that they actually can. And I think maybe I have an example somewhere. I went through a couple of these today. Yeah, so 12608, for example. This one here. This was marked for Prometheus 3. There has been a little bit of discussion, but it's been end of November 23. So if somebody wanted to jump on that, I think there might be a bit of lack of context.
This issue specific seems very relevant to a lot more work. Like it's related to remote write 2.0, related to creator timestamps. So yeah, I think we could use more attention there. I could put extra context.
Ben, maybe?
Yeah, so my understanding was that for 3.0, we're just going to enable histograms by default, enable OTLP by default, and do all the breaking changes. This is basically the scope for 3.0. Everything else is a bonus. So while the native histogram stuff, there's a lot of issues, but maybe we need to kind of scope down 3.0 to just required elements, which is, I would just see like, enabling a few things by default and the breaking changes. We can continue to improve histograms after 3.0 as well. So I don't want to have the sense that this is blocking 3.0.
Yeah, I think my only take on that is I'd like to have native histograms declared as stable. Björn?
Yeah, I mean, I think the strategy so far was that just people tagged issues as, I mean, we had this past thing where anything breaking was where we marked it like this is something for Prometheus v3, and some of these things are like super like tectonic shifts in the whole, like whatever, like it will probably not happen for this. Like the metadata storage is, we just started a new discussion about this, what we want all in the metadata storage. I'm pretty sure we won't pull this off in 2 months, right? So that's, I think, pretty clearly an issue that is totally out of scope by now. But yeah, we kind of need to scope all those issues, right? Also, my feeling is that a lot of people talked about V3, but not a lot of people had like time dedicated to it, like actually getting stuff done. Like, I mean, I'm mostly committed to making native histogram stable, which also happens to be a V3 thing, right? But I'm not like running around and trying to find like work myself on stuff that is marked with V3 or find people contributing to it. And yeah, I guess it's not even clear who has how much time dedicated, which alludes to what I put into the notes already, right? I mean, for me, I mean, I was, well, I am a V3 skeptic, as in, do we really need this? And the vibe at the Dev Summit back then was, this is also like, because the numbers get too high on the 2 dot something version, and we need some visibility, that stuff is actually still changing. And then the thing that convinced me was that there's a literally visible change, which is the UI revamp. And I got the impression this is just in planning stage. I don't know, somebody in here who works on the UI would be like Julius and Augustine, but
Augustine, I know he won't
Sorry,
come.
I'm here.
Okay.
I am just working on other stuff at the same time, so I'm just like listening with one ear. What was it about the UI?
yeah, so the UI revamp, it sounded like what you said somewhere, I don't remember where.
Yes.
Like in the last couple of days, sounded like you were still, or you are almost decided what library to use, but it didn't sound like it's like almost done or there's actual code or something.
Oh no, there's code. There's a branch, Mantine-UI, and it does like most of the pages already. We've decided on Mantine as a framework. The graphing doesn't do anything yet. You can show stuff in the table, but graphing I've kind of left for now in Augustine's court. But if nothing happens there soon, then I'll also like look at that again. And yeah, the plan is still to have something for PromCon. So it's already try-outable. I haven't made much noise about it once. I've mentioned it once in one call. But yeah, it's, you know, it's not gonna be crazily different or anything, but just look a little bit less noisy and cluttered and yeah, be new under the hood and all that.
Okay, cool. I mean, that's great to hear. As it wasn't very visible, I wasn't sure if that's even happening.
It's gonna happen.
Okay, so at least some people dedicated some time explicitly to this.
Okay, so just to unblock Jan, so we agreed that.
Let's maybe hear from Richie real quick.
Okay, sorry.
I'm largely agreeing with Gautam. This is our chance to put in all the breaking stuff. The one addition which I wanted to make is anything which creates eyeballs or drives eyeballs is in my opinion also in scope if we can make it, just to get more airtime. But to me mainly this is a breaking stuff and breaking it aggressively if we can, or where we need to.
Okay, so I was just going to say then, you know, this was supposed to be mostly a call to action to get the Prometheus 3 board a bit more in shape. That we sort of, because community outreach was also one of the goals, right? Just so that we can actually do meaningful outreach here. But I don't know, I'm hearing two versions of 3.0 right now. One was the let's just bump the number and it's not so important what features go in. But there's also the camp of let's break things. And does that mean that would also maybe delay this until maybe delay this past PromCon? Because some breaking stuff might not make it in time. Yeah, I think Ben, go ahead.
I think breaking stuff was always in scope, but we also have a list of breaking changes somewhere marked as Prometheus 3.0. I need to dig that up. But these are like not major breaking changes. It's like removing the old winters function and a few other minor things. And also, this is already in progress, like changing some of the feature flags, like basically removing some of the feature flags because they're already enabled by default. So removing all of these more op feature flags, and I saw a PR targeting the 3.0 branch. So these are the breaking changes that I think are in scope. Like there's like very few that are in. Oh, there's also like this new line character should be ignored or something while doing regex, so that we can do optimizations. There's like a few of them, like maybe like 5 or 6 of them. And they're small enough changes that we should just go for it at 3.0. Like I don't think this is like a feature work that we need to do. Beyond that, we should do the enable histograms by default, and if possible, enable hotel by default.
Björn?
Yeah, but I think this is nicely illustrating that we don't really have a notion who owns what. Like, I think many people think we have this V3 coordinator team, so they will magically make everything work. But in fact, they're just coordinating, right? There needs to be somebody who is doing the actual work. And for example, there's this, what Gautam didn't even mention, it's already in the Prometheus 3 branch, is the left open range selectors, right? And in the end, this was done by a contributor who kind of jumped in, which is great, but I mentored this thing completely, right? And then I even had to push that we have a V3 branch, which is all fine, just that all this time was cut away from native histograms, which you really want to have stable. And so it feels like I have this constant feeling that, quote unquote, nobody's doing anything for real for V3, right? I mean, it's not true, right? We just talked about many things that people are doing, but it's, yeah, I mean, I then jumped on a thing that, I mean, yeah, was just taking away V3 work from other areas, i.e. native histograms. And I don't know, like, yeah, we need more people who can drive this. Like, I mean, there are probably lots of contributors. Community outreach creates people, like, we have people that say, I would like to work on this, but then we need somebody who leads them, approves the pull request and stuff like that, right? And I'm not sure who's doing this, right?
So I feel like we all agree that the main focus for 3.0 is hotel and native histograms. And all the rest is like nice to have. So to enable hotel and native histograms by default, is there anything, Jan, that you notice it's like high risk of not completing?
I think there is a couple of things, like I think that was the one I added to the minutes, stoichiometric metadata and TSDB, that just isn't, that's even tagged not easy as it looks. And given that it's 2 months time over the summer, that strikes me as high risk. The whole UTF-8 discussion that was recently on the mailing list too, that is technically part of the OTLP work, or it's considered currently still part of the OTLP work.
I can remember as well the delta temporality thing. I don't remember exactly the name.
Yeah, support hotel delta temporality, though my understanding is that actually is gets solved on the hotel side.
Okay. Like, is anyone in the team confident to drive this?
Let's hear from Brian. You just raised his hand.
Well, I just want to add, stick my own axe in the grinder, which is the line-oriented regexps. In other words, make dot star match absolutely anything, which I don't even see on the board. but then I'm not coordinating. But that, you know, for me, that's the one thing I would fix in Prometheus 3.
And it's like, it's super well defined. It's very easy to be done, and it should be done, right? This should be a blocker, literally, because it's like 10 minutes of work, and if you don't have an V3, it would be a shame. But somebody has to drive and own it, right? And like Hotel, I mean, this has so many things we could do, right? There's no clear line.
All right. I'm happy to very least add this to the board. Is that? Oh no, it should be on the board. It is definitely marked Prometheus 3.0.
I just want to add, I think there's no blockers to enabling Hotel by default. I don't think there's any blocker to enabling histograms by default. They just won't be stable. They'll just be enabled by default as experimental. Like right now, they're hidden behind a feature flag. We just need to enable that feature flag to true. And I think that would satisfy the requirements.
Well, we want to make sure that we have them behind not feature, but normal flags for immutability. So that you can't, that we don't open up a write path by default.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, basically, I want to remove them from the feature flags and say, hey, they're a little more supported, but they're still experimental, not stable. So if we can get to stable, that's great. But if stability is a blocker, let's
But I
not
mean,
block
the current
3.0 on
feature
that.
flag is just gating the right of native histograms.
Yep.
So
Seems like a good idea to me.
yeah, but then it's still a feature flag, right? Just
No, actually, we could make it into a config file option so that you can enable it at runtime.
yeah,
But
that's just more confusing than the feature flag.
No, it's not. We have a very, very well carefully defined structure, which is things that can change at startup are flags. Things that can change at runtime are in the config file. This has been the way it has been since 1.0.
And
But
maybe in an effort to also get other topics discussed today, please, for all the core developers who have deep insight into things that should be in 3.0, if there's something missing from the board, please do let me know. I'll put it on there. I'm also happy to run after people and see that we can get this a bit in shape, and then we should be good to go, I think.
It would be helpful, Jan, if you have like someone to go to Hotel, someone to go to native histograms, and also if there is anyone willing to be this person.
So there's a few people on the coordination team who actively work on some of these streams. So I think that should be good. And otherwise, I'll just grab someone I feel like has been active on these issues.
All right. Cool.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. So moving on to the next, let me check. From Arv, let me copy. Arv with add first class feature to PromQL to handle info type metrics.
Correct. So, so basically, this is a proposal from Jesus, Björn, and myself about simplifying joins with infometrics in PromQL. So specifically, it's about adding a function to PromQL called info, which is to to be a better substitute for joining with infometrics. So the benefit is that info automatically finds matching infometrics. For example, target info, which is where their OpenTelemetry resource attributes are encoded in Prometheus. So if you take the target infometric as an example, you basically need to know which are the labels to join on, which are by convention for target info, job and instance, and you need to know how to write a join query in Prometheus, which is quite advanced. So kind of the suggested form of the info function is a required first argument, which is a subquery returning certain results, and a second optional argument, which is a selector for the data labels. So the selector would basically let you control the matching of the data labels. Data labels are the infometric labels which are not identifying, and it will also control which data labels to add, and so the benefits of this proposed info function are basically that you don't need to specify which infometric to join against. Because this is supposed to be determined automatically. And you don't need to specify which labels to join on, as mentioned, because that's determined again automatically per infometric. And you're not required to specify which data labels to include. That can also be determined automatically if the user doesn't specify it. And another thing which is actually not obvious but important is that with this info function you would avoid temporary join conflicts when non-identifying labels of an infometric changes, because if, for example, a label of the target infometric changes, like process ID, you will have two versions of target info until the old version goes stale, and for that window, which will typically be 5 minutes, joins will cause conflicts. I see, Arthur, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm jumping into your discussion, but like I feel like if we explain the whole proposal here, it would not be as productive. Maybe we can go to like, what do you expect from us on this call now?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'm interested in hearing the group's feedback on the proposed solution. I mean, what I described is basically the info function, which is the UI, but I think what's more interesting is the technical solution. So the technical solution I've come up with so far is basically to have an index of infometrics for the TSDB head and for the TSDB blocks, but also to have a new native sample type for infometrics, which should track the identifying label set, like in case the identifying label set for the infometric changes. Because let's say you have target info, and target info is then identified by job and instance, but then maybe at some point, for some sample, the identifying label set maybe changes to just job. So this is like this is specified over OTLP, let's say, like at ingestion time. So to kind of to handle that, I've just come up with the solution of storing on the sample level which are the identifying attributes. Yeah, so I guess that's it. I do have a prototype which can be reviewed for where you can review the nitty-gritty details. And I see Björn, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think what would be good to get here is, should we even do this, right? I mean, yes, of course, many of you might just say, yeah, they have to look at it first to decide. But like get in general, I mean, because this is like, we had this, to give the bigger picture, right? There was this whole thing about target info coming from OTel, and what do we do with the target info? If we do it in the current approach, we have this like complicated join queries. Plus we have this staleness problem, which is, by the way, only happening if you don't have staleness markers. Otherwise it's fine, quote unquote. But if you come in via OTLP, you have that problem, right? It could be solved in some way, but currently you have it. And the idea was to just add all the labels, all the resource attributes as labels to everything. And then it was considered as problematic. And the other end of the spectrum is like going really high tech to finally create a proper metadata store, which is like a legitimate approach. It's just like very involved and would take a while. And this is where the idea was coming from, because the target info problem is not new, right? We have the same thing with build info, with queue pod labels, right? This is all the same structure of a problem, that we could just attach the version of a binary to every single metric coming from that binary, but we don't. We decided way earlier that we don't want this. It's a bad pattern. We have like a build info thing. And these joins were like simple enough, but kind of the same problem. And so this is the whole idea, to do like a low-tech version that solves this problem, which is not just happening with OTel. It's a general thing, right? To just make this better for everyone, but it's supposed to be simpler to get than a fully fledged metadata storage with metadata handling and new syntax and everything. I mean, this is a bit of new syntax, but like a minimal thing. That's where it's coming from. But as I said from the beginning, it's not obvious that we should do this. And I think it would be cool to find out, like, what's the general idea? Is this something that's worth pursuing, or is it just a detour we should avoid? Okay, done.
So either Richie or Fabian was first.
Richie was first. Richie?
Sorry, wrong button. It's syntactic sugar, and I strongly believe we should be doing it. The additional pain which is coming in through OpenTelemetry target info, yes, okay. But even before, I would argue that this is one of the things which just makes Prometheus unnecessary hard to use. I like it.
I have actually asking more as a client library maintainer about, I'm wondering about exposition formats. I quickly scanned the proposal. It says it's not supported in text format, obviously, because in text format you cannot say what are the identifying labels. There is apparently an extension for the open metrics protobuf format, whoever uses that. Would remote write support it? Or like what, how do you need to get your data into Prometheus to even use that feature?
So yeah, so this is like this is like a known sub problem that we would have to augment ingestion methods which currently don't annotate the identifying labels of Infometrics. Does that answer your question? Like, I mean, like open metrics text format would have to be augmented, also remote write. And it's not necessary for OTLP, not at the moment at least, not until the entity model is eventually there. It's like at the moment, we just know that job and instance are identifying for OTLP.
All right. No, that answers the question.
Yeah, but I wanted to add to Fabian's question. Like, it's a super nice question, because to me, like, it's a sub problem, but if this problem will actually cause other problems, or it will be very difficult to achieve, because like how we would roll it out, how we would identify what labels, and if we, like, users cannot agree what labels are identified, like there might be some frictions that we don't know yet about. So I wonder if at least like envisioning how it could work, like very roughly, would help to kind of like figure out that this is actually too difficult in general, right? Or maybe easy.
So what you suggest, Bartek, is that kind of we try to define or we try to work on this problem. I mean, right away.
Right. Yeah.
This
is the core idea, that this for Informetric to work, sounds like there has to be some additional kind of metadata, some additional kind of information on each label, if it's a target label or it's not target label, and some kind of rough idea in the most common framework of exposition format, which is likely Prometheus protobuf at this point, or text exposition if you want. Just roughly how difficult would it be to define those would be nice to know, right?
Yeah, we have one person actually who started looking at the open metrics text format. So this is very good feedback, that basically, I guess, as I kind of take this as meaning that we should try to kind of discover problems around augmenting the ingestion formats. I mean, ASAP. Sound scraping. Okay.
In my opinion, it feels like, yeah.
All right, good. So, what's your rationale about scoping to scraping currently?
This primary function of Prometheus.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, like auto problem around kind of like having target information actually in the format itself, like that makes ingestion easy. If we ingest OTLP, like that's kind of information you already have, so that's solved, I believe, or not. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, there are some other.
Yeah, for OTLP it should be solved at the moment. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the remote write will just follow up the scrape exposition format. But I'm more interested, as Fabian, like on the client side, on the Golang, I define my metric. Suddenly, I have to define like what's target, what's not, and that's not. I'm wrong. This should be only maybe done by the service discovery. So maybe. Do we need this in exposition format? Maybe that's the first question, right? Because service discovery can identify this and glue information on top of it, unless we are talking about exporters. So yeah, let's hold on. Okay, so do we need that in exposition format first of all?
If you need,
sorry,
you're asking if you need to add this to the exposition format. Is that what you said?
Yeah, because like now I realize that actually service discovery will just add those target labels, and and that's why maybe it's less important on exposition format. Am I thinking this? Fabian, right?
I could jump in. I just don't want to skip the queue, right? Brian had raised his hand a long time ago. I'm just collecting points, answering all those questions, but I didn't want to jump the queue. Maybe Brian should.
Yeah, I'm adding a new point, so you can come back to me if you're responding to what's going on at the moment.
Okay. So I mean, the first thing is the only exposition format that has this already is ironically the one that nobody uses, which is Open Metrics protobuf. And I think it's in the DNA of the Informetric as it was formalized by Open Metrics. It's in the whole idea is that there are data labels and identifying labels. And so we kind of only have to level up, I mean, only quote unquote, Open Metrics to have it also in the text format. and then everyone has to use open metrics, of course, or we have to change other exposition formats as well. The thing is, the why I think this is not as bad, because Bartek already mentioned target labels. I think in almost all of the cases where I expose something like build info, the data labels are all the labels you usually attach on your instrumentation side, and the identifying labels are all the labels added by the target labels by the service discovery, right? There are a few exceptions where you have other labels, and it's probably usually like exporter stuff where you copy metrics from somewhere else, where you want additional identifying labels. And yes, if we want to support this in an instrumentation library, we need to extend the API in the instrumentation library. And then we also need then we require that the exposition format supports it. What is it called? Cube pod labels, right? That's an example where like it's exposed by a cube state matrix, and it's more than just the target labels where you want like the pod idea as identifying labels. So it has to be work done, but I think it's not like most of the cases would just already work. Also, info metrics, or effectively info metrics, aren't that frequent. So a fallback is always to just give an option to configure during scrape to say, this is cube state metrics in the scrape. I mean, as a workaround fallback in the scrape configure and say, cube pod label should be treated as an info label with this and this label as an identifying label, right? I mean, there are a lot of tweaks you can do without changing anything to make this work. OTLP ingestion has this information as far as we know, right? I mean, other users research this more, right? So that use case, the primary trigger why we think about it, should also work, right? Yeah, that's essentially it. And it's not just syntactic sugar, because that showed up somewhere in the meetings now, right? It's quite explicitly all those things that Ava said, like you don't have to specify which info metric to merge on, you don't have to specify which labels, and you solve the stainless problem. This is all more than just syntactic sugar, right? So it solves complicated syntax, plus it actually requires the user to specify fewer things. Okay, that was my list.
Okay, I want to then sorry for confusion, because it sounds like my kind of like point was wrong. Like I think exposition formats are actually non-priority here, because we might want to extend them for some edge cases. However, remote write might be a higher priority, because you want this target or like info function to work across providers, not only Prometheus. So we don't need to do it now, but maybe we could collaborate since we actually just announcing 2.0. So maybe there are some things we could double check, how it could work.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are not supporting the info metric type at all in remote write right now, but it exists in open metrics, right? In that way, it was always missing.
We have the type, but we don't have special label segregation.
Okay. I mean, so we might just need an additional field.
Yeah, so
you don't see target labels there. Yeah.
I can work with Arf on this. Yeah, thank you.
Brian? You're muted, Brian.
Hadn't really got going. I think the feature is a little bit close to magic. Like I think we would need to work very hard to find something which actually works in a reasonable time period. But I'm not going to stop you trying. And now I want to make it harder. So there are a bunch of metrics in Kubernetes, in kubestate metrics, that are kind of like info metrics. So if you're looking at a pod and you want to know its labels, you have to join on those. And so as a user, I think I would expect the cool magic joining feature to work on those as well. And they're nothing like target info really. I mean, in implementation, they're nothing like it. They're conceptually quite similar.
Should I respond to this directly?
If you know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, this is the idea, right? I mean, if we just implement it for existing info metrics, target info, build info, whatever, that's already a win. But, and I mean, I think Ben brought me to this. It will be very easy to extend the magic to this as well, right? I mean, in the ideal future, cube state metrics would use the future extended exposition format to mark those, like the identifying labels for a cube pod labels metric as identifying labels and mark it explicitly as an info type metric. Then we stumble upon that open metrics wants all info metrics with _info. Maybe we could relax that, but another detail. But otherwise, we could still, that's what I alluded to before, right? We could even say, as a scrape config, in this target, the metric called cube pod labels should be treated as an info metric upon ingestion with the following identifying labels. So that would be the workaround to work with an old cube state metrics. It's of course much less nice, but it's also like there are a few well-defined metrics where you want this to work on. So I think it can be used, and it doesn't have to be used from the beginning. We can incrementally add those things, but it definitely has the potential of being useful for those things as well.
Oh, so we can jump to another topic before that time ends. Like, is it like, do we have any consensus on this, or let's talk again after some time?
I mean, can we form a consensus that we generally want this idea or not?
The consensus is it's too magic, but it won't stop us trying, right?
I'm supportive. Like I love that. I think we should do it. Like it just, there's optimization gain here, the efficiency gain. Like you can kind of like put more metadata in one metric instead of every metric, and I like this. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if anyone in the call kind of wants to review my prototype, because there's, you'd probably understand the most from reading the code, if you know what I mean. So it's not all not all magic anymore. And I'm very interested in getting feedback on the design I came up with, like having a native sample type, for example. And I'd be happy if people can poke holes in my design and eventually see better ways of doing it. So it sounds like Bartek, would you be interested in reading that code, checking the prototype?
Of course. Like
Yeah.
in your proposal, just add a link to the branch, whatever, and
okay. I added it to the notes here. Okay, I'll check the proposal if it's missing there.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I just wanted to mention that we are also talking about designing like a metadata store in Prometheus, because when you persist this in blocks, like I haven't dealt with blocks in the prototype, you will need some sort of metadata store, and we've kind of identified other use cases for metadata store. So I just want to mention that this is like a sub project sort of coming out of this that we are just starting to talk about. Ganesh wants to kind of present an idea of his in the coming weeks.
Thanks. Yeah, that's useful. We already mentioned some of it when talking about 3.0 and being out of scope for 3.0, because it's a big chunk of work, but we still want that and need it. So yeah, thanks for working on it.
All right, we have 10 minutes, and the most voted topic after this is service discovery maintainership. Should we go to a smaller topic, or I think how do we feel?
I mean, we discussed this in the secret team meeting before the service discovery. Maybe we could maybe it's not such a big topic if we can update the state we have. I mean, Simon is also in the call.
Yeah.
He
can give a brief update. So if you look in the submit document, there is a link to an issue I've just filled today, submitted today. And in the issue, there is a link to a spreadsheet. Basically, I've done the work of listing all the service discoveries that we have. So for context, in Prometheus 2.0, we had something like 10 service discoveries, and we had a moratorium because at some point we didn't add the bandwidth to support more service discoveries. The moratorium got lifted at some point, and now we have 29, I guess, service discovery mechanisms. Looking at the opened issues, I would say that the state is probably less worrying than what I was expecting. There are some open issues for some of them, mostly Kubernetes. I think we had a few for Azure, but I suppose that for most of them, they just work as expected. The question that was raised was really, we said when we lifted the moratorium that we were okay to accept more service discoveries to the point that people would kind of engage, and people that would submit a new service discovery would kind of agree to maintain it over time. Obviously, that for some of them, I guess that it worked, but for others, that's more complicated. Yeah, basically the situation. What else?
So we already suggested someone to become Kubernetes service discovery maintainer, right? If this person accepts, would that be enough?
So I would say that Kubernetes, yeah, sorry. Wait, Bjorn wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, this is not just Kubernetes. Kubernetes
Yeah.
service discovery is definitely one that we wouldn't kick out, but it's also, yeah, I mean, we have in the box code, we have the situation that we've, like, somebody filed some very like elaborate issue for EC2 service discovery, and we sit in the box code and say we have no clue what that means, right? And then we thought, okay, so let's ask the EC2 service discovery maintainer, and then there's none. And so it would be perfect, especially for like service discovery by big cloud providers. It would be really nice to have a person affiliated with them in some way. Ideally, they get paid for them by the cloud provider to also keep their service discovery up to date and answer questions and stuff. And we were like already trying to get like Microsoft people, AWS people, like we're fishing for people from those companies to do this, and that would be cool. So yeah, I guess Kubernetes is just like, will always stay there, but the other stuff should be maintained by those because they can also like update the client library in a qualified way and have testing resources and everything. But another category is also stuff that might not be needed anymore, right? We were thinking about like Marathon or something, if this is still needed. And the radical approach or radical proposal was, we could just kick those out of V3 and see how it goes, right? And if people start to like protest a lot, then we have a good angle of saying, okay, if we want to keep this ancient service discovery, you need to maintain it if you want it, right? And those things would maybe work with we could piggyback on V3 to kick out a few and see how it goes. And we still have the freedom to take them, to accept them again into V3, but it would be a nice opportunity to kick something out.
Richie?
A bit of a nuclear option, but we can also talk directly to CNCF and say that this is not long-term sustainable because we don't have all the access and all the time and all the everything, and that maybe CNCF can talk to at least to the major cloud providers about carrying the load of their own storage service discovery.
Have we done this before? Like going like scaling to CNCF?
No, not in this way. But I had this idea thinking back onto a interaction in the governing board This is literally why I came up with this idea. So maybe we can poke Chris Anycheck or something and tell him, hey, we need something. We need some help.
Yes, someone, Brian.
I think there's a midpoint where we ask for help. We don't need to declare that it's unsustainable to state that we would like Amazon people to step up and support Amazon in Prometheus, etc., etc.
Yeah, I would agree with that position. I think it should be in the best interest of cloud providers to provide some sort of support for their service discovery, and make that use that issue and that discussion to raise the point that, hey, if you want more engagement from the community, then you might want to help. From the list, there are, I think, only on top of my head, but I was expecting more service discoveries to be quite outdated or even not relevant anymore. The only one was Aurora, who is dead, but it's used by another project. The same service discovery can be used by Finagle from Twitter, which is still alive, apparently.
If we kick out unmaintained service discoveries in 3.0, what I'm worried is about what we discussed earlier. Like, we don't have many people driving this stuff. If we add more stuff to 3.0, like, how realistic would that be that we get it done?
I mean, kicking something out is easy, isn't it?
Yeah, fair point. Would it be easy if we kick out, like, if we suddenly remove service discovery, even if it's fairly low usage, there will be users that use them. Would that increase the number of issues about, like, I use this, you removed, please add it back, etc., etc.? That's work for us, answering those people.
Yeah, we can ask them to become the maintainer. I mean, this, yeah, as somebody said, there should be like a midpoint. It's not like we don't want to use everything as an aggressive weapon here, but like, if there's I mean, I don't know, I don't want to like say specific things, but it might have been about Marathon or something that it's even officially discontinued and not support anymore. Maybe it was something else. So it's then weird if we still support this in new versions of Prometheus, if there isn't even a new version of that service discovery anymore. I.e., like, if this has a security problem, it would never be fixed. And then we could always say, if you really run on this old like cluster managing solution, then you can also run an old Prometheus. Maybe, like, I mean, those are the things that we could discuss. And as said, like, any service discovery we have also in 3.0, we cannot just kick out later, but we can always add service discovery later that we have kicked out. That's why we have this opportunity here. Is this yes is forever, no is temporary thing, right?
I think it's a good point that we can re-add them.
I'm somewhat torn on this, but in particular with 3.0 around the corner, there is an argument to be made that we can say, okay, there's going to be a breaking change and we just remove stuff unless, and be louder about wanting support. But I'm also not, like, I'm happy to follow the consensus, but maybe we are being a little bit coy.
I mean, this is the hotel, like, what Go Contrib hotel announcement is like in that style, right? We need maintainers for this, or they'll just disappear. We could do that.
That could be one idea, is that we kind of define some sort of maturity per service discovery to say this one is alpha. We don't have it. We keep it in 3.0, but it can go away anytime. They have this in Hotel. They have this notion in Hotel Contrib. They have this notion of alpha, beta stable.
I could. We only have 1 minute. Like, is there any consensus that we want to write it down right now? Okay. So if there's no consensus, how do we move forward with the discussion?
I mean, in the issue, right? 14357.
Okay, sounds good to me. Okay, so we follow up on the issue. We are doing a 1 hour, right? Like, just to be sure. Okay, so we end here. Thanks everyone. I'll end the recording and see you in a month.
Thank you, Arthur, and everyone.